Governors and distinguished guests, please rise for our national anthem, which is being performed by award-winning a cappella group, Nothing But Trouble, from St. Mary's High School in Annapolis, Maryland.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Sandoval, the Governor of the great state of Nevada. Welcome to Washington, D.C. and the 110th winter meeting of the National Governors Association. And let's give another big thank you to Nothing But Trouble, who were pitch perfect. Big hand for them. Yeah, they were awesome. Many people don't realize how steeped in history this organization is. Its founding goes back to 1908, when President Theodore Roosevelt brought governors across the country together to discuss important policy issues. NGA is the only bipartisan organization of the nation's governors. We come together twice a year to share best practices, speak with a collective voice on national policy, and develop innovative issues that improve state government. My fellow governors, welcome to all of you. I'm very humbled to be able to lead this organization, most of whom are right here in this room, are truly our nation's chief innovators. Fostering new technologies, creating new opportunities, and laying the foundation for a bright future for the people of our states. And as governors, we engage with our citizens every day, which is part of the reason why some of the most trusted elected officials in the country are the governors. I'd like to take a moment to recognize two of our newest colleagues, Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey. Governor, if you'd please stand. And Governor Ralph Northam of Virginia. And congratulations to you both and welcome. Now a little bit of housekeeping. Before I go any further, part of the rules require that any governor who wants to submit a new policy or resolution for adoption at this meeting will need a 3/4 vote to suspend the rules to do so. I don't know if this ever happened before, but I got to say it. So please submit any proposal in writing to Anna Davis of the NGA staff by 5 p.m. tonight. Now it gives me great pleasure. We have several distinguished guests with us who need to be introduced. At this year's winter meeting, we have an unprecedented number of international participants with heads of state, cabinet members, subnational leaders, ambassadors, and foreign executives representing 12 different countries. This has never happened before. We're so honored to have you all at our meeting. Would you please stand as I name each of you as I recognize you? From Canada, Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne. And Quebec Premier Philippe Couillard. Minister Scott Bryson, President of the Treasury Board of Canada. From Japan, Special Advisor to the Prime Minister, Abe Shinzo. Mr. Kentaro Sonora and Tottori Governor Shinji Hirai. From Mexico, Tabasco Governor Arturo Jimenez. And Querétaro Governor Francisco Dominguez Serbian. From the United Kingdom, Minister of State at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Sir Alan Duncan. Tomorrow, we will have the first ever, we're going to be making history here, African leader to address the governors at NGA. Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo will give a keynote. And finally, I'm excited, I really am excited to announce that we have with us the largest delegation of Australian public and private sector representatives to ever travel to the United States. In a few moments, I will have the pleasure and privilege of introducing Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, who's with us today. But first, I want to recognize all of my Australian subnational counterparts who have made the long journey to us, or with us, in Washington, D.C., and I understand it's midnight your time, so we really appreciate that. But with us is the New South Wales Premier, Gladys Berejiklian. The Queensland Premier, Annastacia Palaszczuk. The Victoria Premier, Daniel Andrews. The Western Australia Premier, Mark McGowan. The Australian Capital Territory Chief Minister, Andrew Barr. The Northern Territory Chief Minister, Michael Gunner. And from the Prime Minister's Cabinet, the Minister of Tourism, Steve Chobo, is also with us today. And we had the opportunity to have breakfast this morning, and we were wondering who's running government in Australia. But we're really pleased that you're all here. And finally, at this time, we'd like to recognize the companies that have made a significant commitment to support the nation's governors through their membership in the NGA Partners Program. This program includes many of America's leading companies and industry associations. It's with their contributions, this meeting becomes a reality. More than 100 participating companies provide crucial support for the NGA Center for Best Practices, helping to sustain the center as a critical resource for governors in developing and implementing innovative policy solutions. NGA's relationship with private sector leaders are invaluable in helping the center achieve its mission of providing governors with ideas that work. I especially want to thank our platinum level partners for the substantial investment. Accenture, Altria Group, Anthem, Apple, Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, Deloitte, GlaxoSmithKline, Mylan, Pharma, Vertex, and Walmart. Please join me in thanking these companies for their support. And now for the main event. It's my honor to welcome our first speaker and distinguished guest, the Australian Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for joining us today and providing an opportunity to continue our dialogue about how we can all work in partnership to grow our economies together. For those of you who do not know, the Prime Minister's address is especially timely, as 2018 marks 100 years since our two countries became allies in World War I. Since 1918, our relationship has grown beyond just military alliance. Globalization has allowed our states and citizens to collaborate across a range of initiatives and our trade flows and investments to increase despite distance and time zones. I had personally the opportunity to visit Australia in 2016. During this trip, I saw firsthand the significant cultural and economic ties between our two countries. I speak for all of us, Mr. Prime Minister, when I say governors are ready to elevate this important partnership and hear from you on how we can better our bilateral cooperation in the next 100 years of mateship. And as I said last night, once a mate, always a mate. So my fellow governors, ladies and gentlemen, please join in giving Prime Minister Turnbull a warm welcome. Please stand.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much, NGA Vice Chairman, Governor Steve Bullock. Governors of the United States of America, my Trade Minister, Steve Chobo, our Australian Premiers and Chief Ministers, our Ambassador Joe Hockey, Chief Executive of the NGA, Scott Patterson, friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honour for me to be here at the heart of the American Federation. I want to thank you for your hospitality as we thank President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump for the very warm welcome and hospitality accorded Lucy and me during our visit here. Now, both our countries are federations, and indeed our federation and our constitution were in no small measure inspired by yours. It's why some political scientists describe our system of government, which is a parliamentary system, as you know, as being Washminster, a combination of Washington and Westminster. It works very well, but as I said to some of you last night, I don't know whether this is true here, but complaining about the Australian Federation is like complaining about Switzerland's mountains. We work with it. And we're joined by our counterparts, your counterparts, the premiers and chief ministers of our states and territories. Now, our two nations are federations of great states, and each is so much greater than the sum of the parts. As it says on the Great Seal of the United States, on the scroll carried in the beak of the American eagle, a pluribus unum, out of many one. And looking around the room, I'm struck by the sheer diversity of ties that bind our two countries. Governor Herbert of Utah, where an Australian mining company, Rio Tinto, Kennecott's Bingham Canyon mine, has generated more exports, income and employment than any other private sector operation. And Chairman Sandoval, in your state, Australian graduates are setting up an unmanned aerial vehicle delivery service through a company called Flirty, working with the University of Nevada. They've made the first regulator-approved deliveries of emergency medical supplies and retail goods for 7-Eleven, and I'm told they're working with NASA to sort out the details of air traffic control. Now, as you said, Governor, our relationship as proud and independent federations really came of age 100 years ago on the battlefields of the Western Front in World War I. You can read in the letters and diaries of our battle-hardened soldiers, our diggers, how they marvelled at the arrival of the Sammies, as they called them, with their enthusiastic faces and extraordinary-looking equipment. And your Sammies did not take long to win respect and admiration from the Australians. They fought their first true offensive together with Australian troops, the Battle of Le Hamel. At the time, this was arguably the most sophisticated joint operation in history, involving airdrops, artillery, and a line of British tanks. It was the first time American soldiers had served under foreign command in an offensive operation, and under the leadership of our greatest general, John Monash. Monash planned for them to take the village of Hamel in 90 minutes. They did it in 93 minutes. And he chose the 4th of July to do it. America's decisive intervention in the Great War marked its arrival as a global superpower with both moral and realist global interests. President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed this was the war to make the world safe for democracy, a doctrine of principled realism. The Battle of Hamel was a turning point that put the German army on the defensive right up until Armistice Day, and for our two nations, it was the beginning of 100 years of mateship. 100 years in which we have fought alongside you in every significant conflict, forging unbreakable trust through the act of defending each other's liberty and guarding each other's backs. We think of the personal bonds that were formed as 1 million American troops crossed our shores during World War II, and the layers upon layers of institutional ties that have been forged and strengthened since we sealed our alliance with the ANZUS Treaty of 1951. And in more recent times, in the skies over Syria, our combat pilots have fought together under the leadership of American commanders with the shared objective of defeating Islamist terrorism. We've been side by side in Afghanistan for 16 years, our longest military commitment. And in Marawi, in the southern Philippines, our forces provided game-changing support to the armed forces of the Philippines to subdue an ISIL-backed insurgency in that city. And every day, our intelligence agencies are demonstrating the deepest possible commitment to each other by sharing sensitive information, saving American and Australian lives. Just last year in Sydney, our intelligence agencies, our respective intelligence agencies and police, working with our friends in Israel, enabled us to disrupt an ISIL plot to bring down a passenger aircraft, an A380. Hundreds and hundreds of people would have died. I can tell you that our intelligence cooperation with the United States and other partners save lives right around the world where ISIL has had similarly dark intentions. That's what the alliance means today. It is a means for maximising our manoeuvrability and independence, not constraining it. Networks of personal trust, strengthened and expanded over generations, and all underpinned by the deepest possible alignment of shared political values. And this is the genius that really unites our two nations. We define our national identities, Australia and the United States. We define our national identities not by race or religion or ethnicity, but rather by a commitment to shared political values of freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, mutual respect. Patriotism is not tribalism or nationalistic chauvinism. It's not about demonstrations of power and prestige and subjugation, as George Orwell so brilliantly observed in 1945. True patriotism is a shared commitment to a way of life that is guaranteed by the institutions of democracy and the rule of law. Institutions which are accessible to all, but as Governors Bullock and Sandoval and I were discussing earlier, rarer around the world than you might think. Now, since the Second World War, the United States has spread these liberal norms and principles to build an international system which has tempered the exercise of raw power and guided global cooperation. This remarkable system, which obliges nations big and small to play by those rules and to respect each other's sovereignty, has enabled our collective security and prosperity for the entire post-war period. The extension of the system after the Cold War ended has enabled the greatest burst of economic growth, innovation and human advancement the world has ever seen. Australia has supported, reinforced and occasionally led this process at every step of the way. But we know we cannot take any of it for granted. Our part of the Indo-Pacific region has enjoyed so much peace and prosperity for so long that there are some who forget that none of it would have been possible without the sheet anchor of American commitment and strategic power. And that commitment is as important now as it has ever been. American commitment has come at a cost, paid in blood and treasure. And we understand that the American people expect others to pull their weight, as we do and always have. My government is investing in the largest revitalisation of our armed forces, in the air, on the land and on the sea, in the cybersphere, in peacetime history. Our defence spending is on track to reach 2% of GDP by 2020. And in these uncertain times, we should all be thinking about what more we might contribute. And we acknowledge the sense of frustration felt by many Americans that not all countries are contributing to efforts to reinforce and strengthen the open trading system that the United States has helped create for our collective benefit. We have no objections to WTO consistent enforcement actions against behaviour that flouts and thereby undermines agreed international trade rules. We want to work with you to improve the WTO and make it a more effective forum for driving trade reforms and ensuring full compliance with the rules. And we will maintain a dialogue on how our respective systems protect technologies and facilities integral to national security while ensuring our markets remain open and transparent. Now, the rules, the norms, the institutions that enable freedom, security and opportunity have been painfully difficult to build, but easy to break. Now, in Shangri-La, at the Shangri-La Dialogue, I should say, in Singapore last June, I warned that we cannot allow the framework of international law to be undermined. In November, I outlined an ambitious trade policy agenda and committed our nation unreservedly to the principles of open markets, economic freedom and the rules-based trading system. Now, we entirely understand and respect the President's decision to honour his election pledge to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But Prime Minister Abe of Japan and I were determined to keep that project alive. And the TPP-11 will be signed next month in Chile. We do not expect the United States to return to the TPP anytime soon. But by keeping this important trade pact on foot, we have created a live option which would otherwise not exist for a negotiated US return in the future, a possibility which the President himself has referred to. Late last year, my government released a foreign policy white paper which commits us to a far more active role in shaping the future of our region. We'll work with all our partners and friends to promote an open, inclusive and prosperous Indo-Pacific in which the rights of all states are respected. And on December 7, I introduced into our Parliament far-reaching reforms to protect the integrity of our political processes from foreign interference. Now, whether it is terrorism, transnational crime or foreign interference, the primary responsibility of governments, all our governments, is to secure the safety of our people and our way of life. Security and freedom are frequently presented as binary opposites, as if there exists a universe in which you could have one without the other. But these two principles are not mutually exclusive. They can be, in fact, they must be mutually reinforcing. The question is not what freedoms to forego for security. It's what security is required to enable our freedom. Maintaining our security ensures we do not have to close our borders to people, capital and ideas, but rather the very opposite. Maintaining our security allows us to sustain the enormous benefits that flow from our openness to the world. Now, our shared commitment to open markets, transparency and the rule of law has generated an enormous reservoir of trust between our businesses, consumers and regulators, and trust enables commerce to flourish. We like your movies, services and capital equipment so much that our bilateral trade accounts are tilted deeply in your favour. In fact, we haven't turned a bilateral trade surplus with the United States since President Truman, before I was born. Not that anybody's counting. American companies account for fully 1/4 of all foreign investment in Australia. They're contributing to the greatest job surge in our history, with 403,000 new jobs added last year in Australia. And it's a similar story on this side of the Pacific. We've just watched the US economy add 2.2 million jobs last year. Unemployment is as low as it's been since the year 2000. Around 180,000 American jobs are the result of Australian investment here. The BlueScope Steel Group, for example, employs around 3,000 people across the United States, while Austal, Australia's premier shipbuilder, employs over 4,000 Americans, and its investment is growing all the time. It was an honour yesterday and a symbol of our alliance when the President announced that the United States Navy would name a future littoral combat ship to be built at the Austal shipyard in Mobile, Alabama, the USS Canberra. The American and Australian economies are thus helping each other to thrive. And, you know, I always speak for all of the Australians when I say this, we find it impossible not to be constantly inspired by the restless energy of the American people, always reaffirming the power of optimism, resilience, and a relentless curiosity to find a new way and a new idea. And we both know that innovation is the key to productivity, which enables economic growth and more and better paid jobs. Innovation and science are key elements in our economic strategy. Your governor from North Dakota, of course, was until recently chairman of an outstanding global Australian technology business operating here in the United States and, of course, right around the world. So you understand that we have the same commitment to enterprise, but your example is always an inspiration to us. So many of the technologies that have transformed our lives, and so quickly, from GPS, social media, to the hyper platform that has enabled them all, the internet, were developed and commercialised here in the United States. Australia has made great contributions, and from Wi-Fi to the technology behind Google Maps. It's a long list. But the United States remains unrivaled when it comes to commercialisation and innovation. Pundits, of course, have been warning, are very fond of dire predictions, as you know, and they've been warning that the US is running out of oil for nearly 100 years. And yet, thanks to innovation in horizontal drilling and fracking and deep water exploration, US oil production has nearly doubled in the past 10. Now, I commend the NGA's focus under Governor Sandoval on the role that state governments can play in preparing the workforce for innovation and transformation. The signing of a Memorandum of Understanding between the National Governors Association and the Council for the Australian Federation, which is your counterpart, will deepen collaboration in this and other areas. New rounds of company tax cuts in both countries will lead to more investment, which in turn will mean more and better paid jobs. The IMF has lifted its global growth forecasts after the Trump administration cut the US company tax rate to 21%. And we cannot deny that the need to be competitive increases the urgency with which we are pursuing similar tax cuts in Australia. In Australia, we're presenting legislation to reduce tax for all businesses to 25%. We've already achieved a reform bringing tax down to, over time, to 25% for businesses with turnovers up to $50 million a year. That's not a huge business, I might add, at $50 million a year, but those businesses employ half of the private sector workforce in Australia. but we need to go further, as you have done. Now, the flow of investment in technology is not just one way, far from it, as you know. Our $200 billion defence capability build is driving a new generation of Australian defence technology enterprises to integrate into the supply chains of US primes like Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. We want the integration of our defence industry supply chains to match the interoperability of our armed forces. So I'm encouraged to see that Australian companies have been awarded over $1 billion in contracts to supply components for the worldwide strike fighter program, delivering 2,400 jobs. Those figures should double within 5 years. Our target is to become a top 10 defence industry exporter. Now, I know state and business leaders in this room are looking to leverage the Trump administration's commitment to infrastructure, and so are our business leaders. Clearly, our infrastructure companies thrive in the system of transparency and impartial rules that they enjoy in each other's countries. Companies like IFM in Indiana, Transurban in Virginia, Lend-Lease all across the United States. I'd like to see US and Australian infrastructure companies working together in other countries too, in places like Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, where there is enormous need for high-quality bridges, highways, ports, rail and telecom. For this to work, however, we need to get on with the post-war project of shaping an environment in which the most competitive and rule-abiding companies can succeed. We all know that investing in smart infrastructure projects can drive a regional economy. A bridge to a port, which connects to hundreds of other ports, creates much more than the sum of its parts. And in many cases, government backing will be vital. A good example is our recent commitment to build an undersea telecommunications cable, which will ensure connectivity and bring new opportunities for our neighbours in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. Our vision is for a single, inclusive, free trade zone of the Indo-Pacific, a region integrated under a common set of rules and norms that connect us all to one another and which will drive growth and job creation. It's vital that strategic competition does not create rival economic blocs. We look forward to partnering with all countries, including the United States, Japan and China, on those infrastructure projects that meet the criteria of transparency, fairness, accountability and market need. That's also how we constrain large states from imposing arbitrary barriers and engaging in economic coercion against the small. Security and prosperity, they go hand in hand. But we need to shape the rules that are necessary to make this happen. We need to level the playing field for private sector companies, update the rules of the digital world and ensure greater transparency and stronger rule of law in a world which is often short of both. And that's why, as I said, we've backed the Trans-Pacific Partnership so strongly, not just because of the market access it delivers, which is very beneficial, creates jobs and investment in Australia, but because it creates the rules of the road we need to match the economic journey we're embarking on. Now, governors, honoured guests, it's been all too easy for the rest of the world to take America's exceptional contribution for granted. If your long and hotly contested debates have prompted partners around the world to take greater responsibility for their security and prosperity, then they've served a useful purpose. I know it's fashionable to call the passing of American leadership and condemn democracy to a fate of inexorable decline. But let me tell you, that's not what I'm hearing from our trusted partners in our part of the world. And nor is it what the Trump administration is engraving into its most important policy statements. Your national security strategy, with its organising doctrine of principled realism, is a manifesto for upgrading a liberal rules-based system, not breaking it. Your national defence strategy signals a reinvestment in American hard power and the alliance system which amplifies its reach. President Trump's nomination of Admiral Harry Harris as ambassador to Australia underscores this message. American leadership in the world is in our interests, but it is in yours too. I stand with generations of American leaders who've seen its global alliance network not as a burden but as a force multiplier that first and foremost has enabled American prosperity and security. As President Trump himself reminded us, America first does not mean America alone. Now, so much has changed in the last century, in the last 100 years of mateship. We are, after all, living at a time when the pace and scale of change is without precedent. And I don't doubt that this will continue for the next century. But our alliance, our partnership, our mateship, whether it is a century ago or a century hence, will remain built on a foundation of shared values, which are timeless but never more timely. Values as Australian as they are American: freedom, democracy, the rule of law, and the spirit of enterprise which they enable. Thank you very much.
Among two thorns here.
It's an old rose. Very good.
Ready. Good morning again, everyone. Please give the Prime Minister another hand for that spectacular speech.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister has graciously agreed to take a few questions, and I have the privilege of asking the first question, Mr. Prime Minister. And you spoke about it in your speech. Given your focus on innovation in your tenure as Prime Minister, and that being the topic of my NGA Chair's initiative, I wanted to ask how the United States and Australia can be partners in innovation. How can we prepare for the disruptive technologies, and how do they reshape our economies together at both the national and the subnational level?
Well, thank you very much. I think government obviously has to lead by example. It is very critical that we do that. I think that we need to ensure that everybody understands that in this age, as I've said, of change which is unprecedented both in its scale and its pace. And it's worth reflecting on that. You know, how so many of the technologies which have been so transformational are yet so recent. It's the scale and the pace of change that has no counterpart in our history. So that means, given that reality, that environment we can't change, we have to make sure that we make it our friend. In other words, we have to make volatility our friend, not our foe. And that means that clearly, we were discussing it earlier, it is important that we aim for lifetime employability. The job you start when you get out of school or college may not be there for the rest of your life, may not be there in 20 years' time. So you've got to be able to keep retraining, reskilling. That is critically important. We have to ensure that the growth that we get, the advantages that we get from technology, do not leave individuals or regions behind. So I think that has got to be the key focus, but we have to recognise the tenor of the times in which we live, and even if we we don't like them, recognise we can't change them, and say, how can we work this to our advantage?
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Governor Bullock has the second question.
Great, and thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Kind of picking up on exactly where you're ending. I mean, these transformative technologies create so many opportunities for our states and our nations, but there's also challenges, both socially, economically, and security-wise. How's Australia addressing some of the challenges, be it workforce or be it some of the things that are happening where, on the one hand, we have transformative technologies, but on the other hand, there are folks that feel like they're being left behind?
Well, thank you. I think my mic wasn't working before, but there's no substitute for strong economic growth. That's the first point. You know, there has been, I said the pace and scale of changes without precedent, but there have been obviously big technological changes in the past. It's, you know, if we go back to 100 years ago when our soldiers were fighting together in France, the very large percentage of Americans were engaged in agriculture. I'm not sure what the percentage was, but be very substantial percentage in that period. Nowadays it's only a few percent, as it is in Australia. That's come about because of technology. So all of these changes occur, but you need to have strong economic growth to create the new opportunities. This is where, frankly, trade has been very important, as the premiers here know, particular Annastacia Palaszczuk from Queensland and Mark McCormick from Western Australia. We had a huge commodities boom, you know, once in a generation. I think you said, Premier from Western Australia, Mark McGowan, you said it was a once in a lifetime. Well, maybe. Hopefully you'll have a long life and you'll see another one. But the point was, however, that caused a great boom, and then there were big transitional adjustments there. Some regions were hit very hard. However, having said that, because of the opportunities of the free trade agreements we have created, we've seen stronger growth in our regions, and that has been, I think that has been one of the features that has perhaps cushioned the impact of what otherwise would have been a very hard landing. So having many strings to your bow, having a diversified economy is particularly important.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I have a next question, which is this.
Yep.
I have the second question, and with regard to President Trump, he started a national conversation with regard to infrastructure. And I think I speak for all of the nation's governors when we all appreciate the fact, and the premiers, that infrastructure is a constant challenge with regard to mobility and safety for our constituents. Now, I know that given that that's a conversation in Australia as well, how do you work with the premiers with regard to infrastructure, and what is the approach that is happening in Australia?
Well, I'm sure as all the premiers and chief ministers will agree, the federal government works with them on infrastructure entirely to their absolute satisfaction. Never had a complaint. In fact, you know, as I said last night, we have meetings every couple of times a year called COAG meetings, Council of Australian Government meetings between the premiers and chief ministers and the federal government, and we find these meetings so much fun that we decided to go on this trip together and hang out even more. But look, it is okay. Let me answer that question in a way that I think you may find helpful. Firstly, our premiers and chief ministers have enormous experience in this area. I'm just looking directly at Gladys Berejiklian, the Premier of New South Wales. There is an enormous infrastructure boom going on in New South Wales. The New South Wales government and of course her predecessors, Liberal premiers Mike Baird and Barry O'Farrell, really set in train a big infrastructure commitment in New South Wales, which is, of course, where Lucy and I live as well. The other premiers have made great achievements as well. So there's a lot of reservoir of experience there. Historically, the federal government has been made grants, just literally written out cheques for contributions to roads. So there are some, roads that I was inspecting in Queensland recently, in Annastasia's Palaszczuk estate, where the federal government is contributing 80% of the cost, others where it's contributing 50% of the cost, and so forth. But we have to get smarter about the way we invest in infrastructure. We have had a practice which Ambassador Hockey started when he was our Commonwealth Treasurer, Federal Treasurer, of encouraging states to recycle assets and to sell state-owned assets. Dan Andrews from Victoria recently sold a port at a very good price too. And recycle those assets, sell them, and then deploy the money into new infrastructure. The state, the government, is often very well placed to take the construction risk, and then having got an asset built and underway, to then be able to sell it to pension funds and superannuation funds that are looking for that kind of reliable return. But I think we also have to do more to capture value. Now, toll roads are fairly straightforward from a financing point of view. We have a lot to learn in Australia, and in many respects the experience in America is very instructive on how to capture value out of rail. We have to start looking at urban rail generally as a property deal, and develop the means to capture some of the value or the accretion in value to real estate that's occasioned by the construction of the rail. Some of your cities have been very innovative in doing that, and we've been looking very carefully at that. In other words, we need a lot more infrastructure. We need to be smarter about how we go about it. We need to look at every angle, and that's one of the reasons I've set up a innovative project financing unit in our own federal government, getting to make sure that we do everything we can to get the maximum dollar invested, stretching the taxpayer dollar as far as we can for the benefit of infrastructure right around the country.
That, though we're individual states, doubtless each state leader or governor has a keen or intimate understanding of that state's relationship with foreign countries. As an example, I know that between 2016 and 2017, Australians visiting Montana increased 41%. I'm hoping in 2018 that will double, so I'd like to invite you there. But also we know what our trade relationships are, like how much of state dollars in Montana, both exports that we have to Australia and imports. Recognizing that trade policy is set at the national level, but it's the local communities or the subnationals that really see the on-the-ground impacts of trade policy. How, from your perspective, can we, I guess, better help local communities understand the impacts of trade policy and what this does for us?
Yeah, well, thank you, Governor. I think the challenge for us as leaders, as political leaders in particular, is to ensure that the lure, the easy lure of protectionism doesn't overtake us. Look, the way we make the case in Australia is we just say, look at the evidence. 403,000 jobs last year, largest growth in our history. Fact. 16 months of continuous monthly jobs growth, the longest for at least 40 years plus. I don't think we've found a period when there's been a longer continuous jobs growth. All of that is supported by having bigger markets, greater opportunities. Now, we don't presume to give, we're happy to share our experience. We certainly don't presume to give advice. We're flat out. All of the leaders here, Michael Gunner and Andrew Barr and the premiers I've mentioned, we're all flat out managing our own states and territories and responsibilities. But, you know, we're happy to offer you this. I think you have to just make the case that trade means more jobs, more investment, more exports. I mean, if you look at the Northern Territories experienced, I mentioned Chief Minister Gunner a moment ago, you know, the massive investment there, and US investment and Japanese investment in the oil and gas business, particularly in the LNG business, has created thousands of jobs and high quality jobs. It's exporting, yes, it's trade, but you can see the opportunities there. If you go, if you go back to Queensland, where I was recently giving a speech in Toowoomba, which is a regional city to the west of Brisbane, up on the Great Dividing Range, beautiful city, and it's at the heart of the Darling Downs, which is a big agricultural area. There is a new airport that was recently built there by the private sector, by the Wagner family, and that is now exporting the produce of the Darling Downs to put it on the dining tables of Asia. Some of the best produce in the world. Why are we able to do that? Because of those free trade agreements. The TPP will enable us to do more of it. That's what we've got to do. So, you know, we are a medium-sized, open economy. Trade is good. It means more jobs, more investment for us, and that's how we promote it. But other than offering our example, we don't presume to give you political advice.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister, for being with us today. And before you head back on this long journey back to Australia, we're excited to have you preside over the signing of a memorandum of understanding between the subnational leaders of our two great countries. So we're going to go off stage as we reset for that, and we'll be back with you in a moment. Please again give a big hand to the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Sure.
If I could ask everyone to please be seated. If I could have everybody's attention, please. I'd like to invite Australia Capital Territory Chief Minister Anthony Barr, as well as the Prime Minister. The Chief Minister is the current chair of the Council for the Australian Federation. He will sign this MOU on behalf of the Australian Premiers and Chief Ministers. This memorandum signifies our devotion to developing stronger relations amongst our states and territories. By working together, we can promote and advance economic growth that benefits all of our citizens. And again, I know this is the third time, but I want to give a big hand to the Prime Minister for joining us today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. President. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to now pivot the conversation to hear from our Australian counterparts. Our commitment to working together beyond this dialogue is critical to the growth and development of our state economies. Increasingly, across our two countries, we are seeing hurdles and opportunities to this economic growth created by new innovations. Today, with my fellow governors and the Australian premiers and chief ministers, we are hoping to learn from our peers on the different approaches to these shared challenges and what innovative policy ideas have been developed in the face of these fast-paced changes. So now, I want to turn to the Queensland Premier, Annastacia Palaszczuk, who I had the pleasure of meeting during my travels to Australia. Premier Palaszczuk will tell us about what's driving Queensland's innovation economy and what role do you see the United States playing in that? Good morning, Premier.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Governor. It's a pleasure to be here with all of our counterparts, and it was lovely to hear from our Prime Minister. Look, I think we've got a lot of opportunities to work collaboratively together and to share ideas. In fact, this is my fourth visit to the United States as Premier, and every time I try to visit a new state, and a lot of the ideas that I pick up I take back to Queensland. We have a very diversified economy, and we have a program called Advance Queensland, which is a $450 million fund which we're investing in business development, in industry attraction, in scholarships, especially for women, to allow women to stay involved in research. And I'm also proud that in my cabinet we have 50% women as well. So it's a world first. We've been able to achieve that for 2 terms. We also know that we need to continue to diversify from some of the traditional areas of agriculture and resources. And the Prime Minister was talking about being export-driven. We've actually increased our exports over the last year by 25% to $70 billion. And being so close to Asia, we believe there's a great opportunity for US companies to use us as a foot in the door to get into some of those economies being so close and within the shared time zone. So I honestly believe that in terms of renewable energy, there's great opportunities for us to share our latest technologies, but also to, if you're going to prepare people for the jobs of the future, you need to look at your education systems as well. And I'd be interested to hear from other governors. We have coding and robotics now starting at prep in all of our schools. I believe that gives us the opportunity to really prepare our children for the future. We also have great educational institutions, and I'm very happy, Governor Sandoval, that we'll be signing a sister-state relationship later on today, looking at allowing an exchange of students from your state to my state, but also to look at where that innovation is happening in other areas that we can promote. So our Advanced Queensland Fund has created more than 9,000 jobs already in Queensland. It's only been operating for a couple of years, but we firmly believe that through innovation you can create those jobs for the future, but you have to, in my state, I'm very hands-on. I get out, I meet with people, I look at opportunities, I connect them with people, and I think if you work collaboratively together, it can lead to great outcomes. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share those thoughts today.
Thank you, Premier Palaszczuk. I'd like to now introduce the Premier of Australia's most populous state.
Popular?
I'm not going there, Premier. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian. Premier Berejiklian, your state has taken an innovative approach to investment. New South Wales is known for leveraging a unique infrastructure financing model, and now you've become a leader in social impact investment. If you would please elaborate on both of those, and welcome.
Thank you, Governor Sandoval, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here and to share some of the different things we've been doing in New South Wales. And our innovative approach to financial management has really put our budget position in a very strong position, and our economy is growing faster than about 30 OECD nations, and we implemented an innovative policy of what we call asset recycling. So we looked at what assets the government had, and could we involve the private sector more in managing and owning those assets or leasing them over a long period of time. In so doing, we've raised net more than 30 billion in the last 3 or 4 years, and in addition to that, it's really strengthened our budget position, and what that has meant is we've been able to invest that into our infrastructure pipeline. So now we have no government debt on our books, we have a growing balance sheet of 40% over the next 3 years, and we have an infrastructure pipeline of $80 billion worth in the next 4 years alone for a state of 8 million people. So we're building a new metro in Greater Sydney, major roads, schools, hospitals, because of our innovative financial management approach. In addition, we're seeing innovative approaches to infrastructure because we're building so much at the one time. We're really learning how to manage that growth, and I'd be interested to share experiences of other states, because I know infrastructure is very topical at the moment in the states, and we'd be really happy to share that. In relation to social impact investment, we've been able to collaborate with the non-government sector, community organisations and private investors in areas in child protection, in areas like dealing with recidivism for people who leave prisons, really allowing collaboration between the three sectors. The private sector gets a return on their investment by purchasing bonds. The government gets a success rate in social cohesion and in getting greater outcomes. And we've really seen as a government, the more we involve the private sector and the community sector, we've been able to improve our service provision. And if I could also mention a new shopfront we have in New South Wales called Service New South Wales. We've used technology to improve what we call the citizen experience or the customer experience. And we now have a shopfront where you can do 850 transactions, either online or in person, ranging from getting a licence to government information to any other information. So your touch point in government is a one-stop shop now in New South Wales, and we're trying to increase that platform through technology as well. But the real message for from New South Wales is we're excited about our infrastructure investment of $80 billion in the next 4 years, and many American companies are helping us build that infrastructure. We can't do it on our own, and we're thrilled that that's the case, and want to invite more US global firms, of course, to play in New South Wales. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Premier, and congratulations on all of your success. Now I'm pleased to introduce for remarks the Premier of New South Wales' neighbouring state, Victoria, and introduce Victoria Premier Andrews. I had the pleasure of meeting with Premier Andrews in Melbourne, where I saw Victoria's innovations in biotechnology and infrastructure. Premier Andrews, would you please describe how you have developed those sectors and what role international engagement has played in that? Good morning, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Governor Sandoval, Governor Bullock. It's a great honour and a privilege, I think, for all of us to be here today and to hear from our Prime Minister, but also to share some thoughts, but do some listening as well and some learning, I think, from the experience of so many of our sovereign subnational colleagues here at the NGA. Last night at the Embassy, we talked a lot about the fact that we had shared values and a shared experience in terms of sacrifice, but also a shared positivity, a shared hopefulness about the way in which our partnership and relationship can become stronger and stronger for the mutual benefit of both citizens and taxpayers in our jurisdictions and right across the United States as well. Part of that is not taking the relationship for granted, so it is great to see us doing new things and committing ourselves to even further strengthening of that important partnership. You've prompted me to talk about infrastructure. The Prime Minister already began that conversation by pointing to asset recycling, and Victoria has a very good example of that. Our port, the busiest container port in our nation, we sold that. This is basically a left of centre government, a Democrat government from your point of view, selling one of our biggest public assets because it served no purpose having it on our books. It would be a lazy balance sheet to retain that asset. We got a record price and we've invested that in the biggest road and rail infrastructure program the state has ever seen. That is unfolding, and that's driving jobs, economic opportunities, skills attainment, and we couldn't be doing that. We simply couldn't be doing it without so many of our US partners and friends. That's true asset recycling, putting to use capital that has no real purpose being on our books. Beyond that, in terms of public-private partnerships, which I know is very much part of that national conversation that President Trump wants to have around the infrastructure task, we've got a lot to offer, I think, there. Always things to learn too, but in Victoria we have got away some 31 of those public-private partnerships, everything from parcels of schools, valuing mainly only as little as $200 million, up to toll roads that are $15, $16, $17 billion in scope. There's a lot that I think we can share, and there's a lot of opportunities from a professional services point of view. In terms of innovation, Melbourne and Victoria has always been well known for really, really good science, biotechnology, medical devices, pharmaceuticals. Our partnerships with so many institutes of research and learning here in the United States, and that value chain in terms of taking products to market, those linkages are really very, very important and highly valued by us. And we're pivoting, I think, to becoming not just a hub to the region or a launching pad to our Asia-Pacific region in biotechnology and medical research, increasingly in the tech sector and particularly the cybersecurity sector. We're becoming, I think, a leader in our nation and an opportunity for our partners, and there are no better partners in those endeavours than our oldest and trusted friends, which are, of course, the people and their representatives here in the United States. So it is a great honour for us to be here, not just to sell our wares, that's an important part of it, but also to learn and to commit ourselves to an even stronger partnership as we look to the future. Thank you so much, Governor.
Thank you, Premier Andrews. Now we'd love to hear from Premier McGowan from Western Australia, which covers 1/3 of Australia's mainland. Premier McGowan, please share a few words on the innovations in your state, sir.
Thanks, Governor. Just so you all understand, Western Australia, it's 35% of the nation's landmass, which means it's the same size as Texas, Alaska and California put together. We have a very strong history and relationship with the United States of America, particularly because in the Second World War, the largest submarine base in the Southern Hemisphere was in Perth, our capital, at our Port Fremantle, and a whole range of, in fact, it was the second biggest submarine base in the world in the Second World War. Senator John McCain's father, Admiral McCain, was based in Fremantle for a number of years during the Second World War, and the McCain family has a strong memory of our city. Our state is also the place of origin of people you might have heard of, Heath Ledger and Sam Worthington. Hugh Jackman did his acting training in Western Australia, and one very long-standing connection between the United States and Western Australia is your President Herbert Hoover, the 31st President of the United States of America from 28 to 32. He worked as a mining engineer in our goldfields in the late 1800s for around 3 years, where he ran a range of gold mines out there, and the local hotel in one of the towns is now called the White House as a consequence. He left Western Australia in very torrid circumstances following a relationship with a barmaid, actually, and headed back to the United States consequent to that. Look, our state is a very strong mining province. Chevron has invested in oil and gas in Western Australia over the course of the last 8 or so years, around 80 billion Australian dollars. We're the largest iron ore export location in the world, and we have strong gold mining and other industries. But we're far more than that. The thing that I think is most appealing to the United States, apart from our shared history, is the fact that we're located in the same time zone as 60% of the world's population to our north, China, Japan, all the countries of Asia. It's an ideal place for headquarters for American companies that want to interact with the region to our north. And it's also an ideal location for industries like defence and US ship repair and maintenance and US ship visits and the like. So we actually do have a range of companies headquartered in Western Australia. It's an ideal place to do business. It's located in the right part of the world, and there's that strong shared connection and shared history between Western Australia and the United States. So thanks very much for having me here. I look forward to today's events.
Thank you, Premier McGowan, for your insights. That's a lot of land. Continuing on this conversation, we'd love to hear again from Australia Capital Territory Premier Chief Minister Barr. Chief Minister Barr, as you represent your country's capital and we are in ours, we would love to hear more about what the Australian Capital Territory's international engagement strategy is. Good morning and welcome, sir.
Thank you, Governor. And as Australia's national capital, Canberra takes its responsibility to reflect the best of our nation to the world, and through our international engagement strategy, we as a small open economy seek to attract new capital and new investment into our city. Canberra is home to Australia's best educated, wealthiest, healthiest, longest living and happiest Australians. And as the national capital, we are, of course, home to the Australian government, and 1 in 3 of my constituents works for the Prime Minister, and that brings considerable benefits, both in our relationship with the United States, exemplified through partnerships in the space industry, for example, where the world saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon courtesy of the Honeysuckle Creek Deep Space Tracking Centre in Canberra. Those first images were beamed around the world from Canberra, reflecting our very strong space industry and partnerships with NASA. As the Prime Minister mentioned, Wi-Fi technology was developed in Australia. It was developed in Canberra by the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation. So as home to 5 universities, the Canberra Institute of Technology, we are Australia's education capital. We are a small city of 420,000 people, and so need new investment in order to grow. But we have the great advantage in my role as both Governor and Mayor of the City of Canberra to be the most innovative government in Australia, to be able to quickly implement new public policy, and we've done so through many different programs and projects, including infrastructure investment, public-private partnerships, tax increment financing, land value capture, all of the best examples of public policy that we've heard around the table today can be implemented in Canberra, Australia's capital, and we seek to lead our nation through the good implementation of public policy. Thank you for the opportunity to say those words today.
Thank you, Chief Minister Barr. Truly appreciate your attendance here today. And lastly, Chief Minister Gunner, Will you close out these remarks by discussing how the Northern Territory is using new innovations to revitalize its rural economy, workforce, and defense systems? Good morning, sir.
Thank you, Governor Sandoval. Most Americans would know the Northern Territory is the home of Uluru, the Rock, and of Kakadu National Park, the setting of the Crocodile Dundee movies, and we're obviously very supportive of the Tourism Australia's latest push to get more Americans to visit our great country. I actually want to start with a thank you. I call Darwin, the capital of the Northern Territory, home. At the start of this week, 19th, Monday, we commemorated the bombing of Darwin. 76 years ago, the same fleet that bombed Pearl Harbor bombed us, and 235 people died that day. Nearly half were Americans. I call Darwin home still because of the sacrifices of young Australians and young Americans. And I just want to say on behalf of the people of the Northern Territory, thank you for defending our country in World War II. Just as America realised the strategic value of Darwin then, you do today. And we obviously have the US Marine rotations through the Northern Territory, and we have the enhanced air cooperation that's existing between our two countries as well. Darwin is right at the top of the NT, of Australia, and it is easier for us to get to Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, Singapore, than it is for us to travel to our nation's capital. We are engaged with Asia. We are a huge landmass. We're twice the size of Texas, but with only 1% of Texas's population. The Prime Minister and Governor Sandoval both mentioned trade, and I do a lot of work through the Asian region particularly to sell the economic opportunities of investment in the Northern Territory and Australia. And a constant message I receive, and this shouldn't be something we have to innovate, is that people want it to be easier to invest across state boundaries. They want greater certainty of how we work together within Australia. And I'm not sure if you get the same message here in America. And so I've taken that on board, and we've had the first ever joint cabinet meeting in Australia. So my government sat down with the South Australian cabinet, and we met and we sorted out some of those issues that cross state borders. And I put that same offer on the table to our fellow premiers. I'm catching up with Andrew Barr, and Annastacia is very interested in doing something similar so that we can sell our country properly and the investment opportunities are easier for companies. And I think that's a really important message for us to take on board. That's what I'm hearing. And so we're trying to innovate in how we do government to make it even easier for people to invest. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister Gunner. Now is an opportunity for the governors to have an exchange and a dialogue with the Premier. So I was going to ask my Vice Chair, Governor Bullock, to ask the first question.
Great. And again, each of you, thank you for being here. This is both significant, and I recognize that it's historical, and as well to have the Prime Minister here. For any of you, as we talk about the opportunities that we have at a subnational level, certainly that we have 50 diverse states, but all afford opportunities for enhanced relationships with each of you. In addition to what, as we signed it like a memorandum of agreement between our respective organizations, what suggestions do you have to further enhance either the state or the subnational relationships between where you govern and where we govern?
I might chime in, Governor Bullock. Premier Berejiklian from New South Wales. I think in terms of really deepening our relationships, if there's a particular policy idea or initiative we see a state doing, I'd like to have a buddy system where we can spend time in each other's jurisdictions and really deep dive into a particular area of policy or a particular delivery method which we think we can apply to our own jurisdictions. And I think today is the start of deepening that relationship in being able to have true partnerships into the future. And I'd like to see us progress that potentially with having buddy states in areas of policy or cooperation that we think we can improve the lives of our citizens.
Just if I can say from a West Australian point of view, Western Australia has sister state relationships with provinces in Japan, China, Italy and Indonesia. But amazingly, and I didn't know this till recently, we don't have any sister state relationship with any state in the United States. And I think those sorts of arrangements do enhance that cooperation and exchange of ideas and exchange of cultural and social activity and educational cooperation where students from each jurisdiction go to each state. So those sorts of things are those sorts of things I'm interested in, and I've had a conversation with the Governor of Texas about Texas, which as I said is about a third the size of Western Australia, joining with Western Australia and sister state relationship. Those sorts of things I think are very beneficial. And so, and I know Queensland's organising one, I heard in your speech, Premier, so that's the sort of thing that Western Australia thinks would help.
Well, thank you. And were there any other premiers who wish to respond?
Governor
Yes,
Sandoval, I was just going to add to Governor Bullock's question. We have a significant in-market presence with officers and staff in Boston, New York, Washington and San Francisco. And I may have missed one along the way, but it's a significant in-market presence. And that's more, I think, geared towards relationships between service providers, investors, business to business. Maybe picking up the point that Gladys has made, maybe there's an opportunity for us to have better government-to-government relationships through those principally in-market trade staff who are about making deals. Maybe we can make some good policy exchanges as well through that. We'd certainly be very, very pleased to do that.
Governor Bevan.
I'm intrigued by the comments that some of you have made about the privatization of certain public assets. This is something that has been talked about in large measure in the US, but there's not been much progress made on this front. I think we could learn a lot from you. If you could, either one of you, a couple of you in particular spoke about it, although perhaps all of you have some experience. Any of you that could give us some insight into when did this process begin? Who were the strongest advocates for? Who were the greatest opponents of? And more critically, are there any restrictions as it would relate to who the acquirers of certain assets might be? Any advice or insight at even 30,000 feet would be helpful.
Certainly, yeah. I might step in first if that's okay. In New South Wales, we started the process in earnest about 5 or 6 years ago, and the biggest challenge is bringing the community with you. But what we said to the community was, instead of owning a telegraph pole, you can own a school, a hospital, a new railway line, a new road. So it was about explaining to the community that having an asset which the private sector could run better was of no use to the community. We would be better off taking that capital up front and investing in things the community needed. So that was our way of winning. My predecessor, Mike Baird, actually took that policy to an election. So we actually had a mandate to do that. We've managed to recycle assets in relation to our electricity distribution network, to our land titles office, ports, a superannuation or pension fund, which we shouldn't be doing, or government shouldn't be running. So what we did, however, is make sure that government is a strong regulator. The community needs to know at the end of the day the government has responsibility for making sure that all our essential services and infrastructure run properly. So long as you can ensure the community you have a strong regulatory framework in place, and that this investment, the capital you're reaping from we have long-term leases, so we said to the community a 99-year lease or a 35-year lease depending on the asset. We said to the community, well, we're better off using that capital up front to invest in things you need, and that's now allowed us to deliver a pipeline of $80 billion worth of infrastructure, and our economy is growing really fast. People are starting to see the benefits, and they're excited that they get a new school, a new hospital, a new road, as opposed to lack of visibility on an asset which just sat on our balance sheet.
Just a quick follow-up. Were there dedicated, and I would love to get yours as well, Premier Andrews, but were there was it predetermined that the resulting
yes,
sale
the
would
proceeds,
be
yes.
plowed proceeds? Thank you. Would be plowed back in
Absolutely.
to infrastructure, and that was that done legislatively then?
It wasn't done legislatively, but we took it to an election. We took it to an election, and the important thing is, we used to hear in other jurisdictions around the world where people used to, or governments used to recycle assets to retire debt. That wouldn't work. That doesn't work. You need to reinvest it into the community and grow the community and the balance sheet, which is what we've done. And our net worth as a state is going to grow by 40% because the investment in infrastructure has really also triggered a lot of private investment. So the business community is excited by what we're doing. So they're also investing. And it's really allowing our state to have the biggest boom in infrastructure we've ever had. Thank you.
Governor Bevan, our experience is very similar to the New South Wales experience. If you own an asset that has a significant capital value and there's no good public policy reason for it to be in public hands, then that money is essentially being wasted. It can be repurposed, retasked, provided you get the regulatory framework right, provided you get the industrial relations or labour relations right, provided you don't compromise the core purpose of that asset, then you can put that money to much, much better use. This debate for us is a little bit like borrowing as well. You know, money's cheap at the moment, capital's very mobile, and there's a great urgency. There's an impatience in the citizenry to get things built. People want progress, they want development, whether it's infrastructure at a local scale, a school, a hospital, or better transport connections. The only way to get that done is to borrow more and do that in a mature way. But we all guard jealously the credit ratings we have, at least we do, I'm sure all of us do. That means there are limits to how much you can borrow. So then if you've got assets that really don't need to be on the books, we had a public debate. We took this policy to the election. We were not in government at the time and received that mandate, that coming to government mandate to do it. We got a very good price and we were very clear about where the proceeds would go. And it's part of an infrastructure agenda that's got 65,000 Victorians in work. That's just the public sector spend. So I think if you lay the case out, if you're very clear about what your intentions are, then I think you can bring the community with you.
One final quick follow-up. Is there, if the government of China or a major Chinese player wanted to buy one of your ports, what would preclude that?
Perhaps I should talk about that.
No, bad example, good example.
I provided lessons learned. So we did sell our port, and a Chinese company bought it, Lambridge. I got elected off the back of that, so I was in opposition when the port was leased. What we've done to provide confidence in that strategic asset and how it's used, and that it is used properly and commercially and economically, is the company still carries 100% of the costs and they get 100% of the profits. But we've now got a 20% stake back in the port, and we have direct say over the appointment of the CEO, the CFO, the COO. If they make any changes, we essentially get a say in the board makeup. So we've got much greater say in the decision making. So that provides a lot more confidence. And obviously we've also got the Utilities Commissioner and the regime around pricing and that regulatory side. But we've found with those changes, we've got a lot more confidence to people who are worried about how the port was being managed. So sometimes you've got to retain some level of stake as a government. But we sold it, or leased it, and got the money. So the returns that Premier Andrews and Premier Berejiklian are talking about, we've still got, but you've got to have that level of...
But Governor, just to give you a degree of confidence, in Australia, the states are responsible obviously for managing the assets and for building the infrastructure, but our Foreign Investment Review Board, which the national government runs, has a strategic responsibility to tick any foreign investment in a strategic asset. So before we actually lease the asset, it has to go through the Foreign Investment Review Board. If they're local players, it doesn't. So some of our assets, local pension funds, Australian-based, have actually, so we're able to say to our community, local mums and dads are investing in this road. But if it's a strategic asset with foreign investment, the national body, the national government actually has the tick off. So that gives our community confidence that there's that framework in place.
To end on a positive note, the China Sovereign Wealth Fund is a significant part of the consortium that purchased the Port of Melbourne, Australia's busiest container port. So that's a rigorous process. It's one that's not run by the states. It's run at a national level as it should be, but it does deliver, I think, good outcomes. There are others who would have different views, but we get the job done. And sorry?
Do you have a stake in it?
No, we would be consulted perhaps, but nothing more than that. It's run against a whole lot of strategic and other imperatives that have to operate at a national level.
Any other questions from governors for our premiers? I suppose I'll ask one. I've been impressed with the fact that Australia's enjoyed 25 plus years of prosperity without a recession. And so I'm curious as to what you attribute that to and what is your biggest challenge in each of your respective states.
Thank you, Governor Sandoval. The biggest challenge for us is sustaining our growth and preparing future employees, the job skills and training. And so generally speaking, our infrastructure pipeline, our asset recycling, our strong budget position allows us to be in a position to continue to grow. But our biggest challenge is making sure we have the skills, the right skills, and that we have an eye to the jobs of the future. 11 and 12, 13-year-olds will be working in jobs we haven't thought about yet. And so we're really focusing on education, skills development and jobs. And I think that has been able to sustain our economies, really being early adopters of technology, being first movers in a lot of ways. But definitely my state is focusing on jobs and skills and attracting that investment to continue to grow our economy. We also managed to reduce taxes in the last two budgets, so we've allowed the business community to really flourish as well. But I think the biggest challenge for us moving forward is jobs and skills and education.
Just to attribute our state's or our nation's success over the last 27 years, what happened in the 1980s is we had a very reformist national government, which was called the Hawke-Keating government, and it removed the trade barriers that Australia had built up over many years. It deregulated a whole range of sectors of the economy, but in particular the banking sector, and it floated the Australian dollar. And so from that point forward, our economy boomed in areas that we're essentially good at. So in Western Australia, my state, the mining industry in particular did extraordinarily well, and so now we have some very, very successful miners on a world scale that export just not only to the region, but principally to the region, but around the world as well. If I was to say the one thing that is the biggest issue for me, it's sort of the flip side of that, which is our state's economy is very focused on one industry, it's important as it is, but we also need to make sure we diversify our economy into other areas. So that's why, whilst I'm here, I'm talking to people about tourism or defence investment or all the other sectors of the economy, innovation, all the other sectors of the economy that Western Australia has the skills base for, which are primarily engaged in mining, but we'd like to see a broadening of our state's economy base. So if you have investment that you want to put into a very successful place with a very nice lifestyle and you want to send your staff somewhere where they don't ever want to come home again, send them to Western Australia and you'll be able to divest yourself of staff that might be problematic and create a business in a very welcoming and very decent place to live.
Thanks, Governor. I would observe that the success in the Australian economy has been a large degree of bipartisanship on key economic settings over 3 decades now. And although different sides of politics will have many things to argue about, where there has been consistency for Australia has been in pursuit of free trade, in establishing consistent regulatory policy settings in so many sectors of our economy. And in spite of some of the competitive federalism that you've seen around the table today, that's mostly been in good humour, well, all has been in good humour, we are able to work together effectively to achieve a range of national ends. And The challenges that most of us are facing now are the pains of growth. They say economics is a dismal science, and there's always a downside to where your economy's at, but for many of us, it's challenges of near full employment, skill shortages, but in some instances it's needing to attract capital into certain industries that are needed to diversify our economy. Our situation in Canberra is the complete opposite of Western Australia in that we have no natural resources. We are entirely a service-based economy, but yet that represents a wonderful opportunity for us. And although we are only about 1.7% of Australia's population, we now generate nearly 3% of our nation's service exports. So that open approach, an export-focused approach, is what's generating jobs in our city. And of course, being home to the Australian government is a wonderful boost for us.
Governor.
I want to again thank all the premiers for being here, and as the Prime Minister alluded to, I had the great honour and privilege of serving as chairman of Atlassian, which was an Australian-based software company which had the distinction of being the fastest growing software company in Australia, and also I believe still holds the record of having the most successful IPO on NASDAQ of any Australian company, started by two mates from the university, Scott Farquhar and Michael Cannon-Brooks. Now has a market cap of over $12 billion and employs close to 3,000 people. My question for the premiers, because it was alluded to about the importance of skills in workforce and the digital transformation, but maybe you'd want to go a few clicks deeper on things that, or ideas that you might have for us in terms of how you're building out the appropriate skills and recruiting and retaining talent, because I know that when we were building Atlassian, we were constantly challenged by having the right kinds of senior skill sets that were there. But also, I just want to say congrats to your university systems, because these were, right out of university, decided to start this company, and what an amazing job they've done.
Absolutely, yeah. Governor Burgum, we love Atlassian. Making a great contribution to New South Wales, Australia and the world. But what we've done as a government is we've actually put in seed funding to adopt premises in the heart of our CBD to encourage greater collaboration between our IT sector and our incubator hubs. I'm sure each state has their own incubator hubs. We recently set one up in New South Wales, in Greater Sydney, 11 floors, and we're seeing a lot of startup community members now adopt that place. And essentially, any person in our state who has an idea comes and makes their pitch to a global brand. Atlassian's there, and Microsoft chose Sydney as the 8th place in the world to set up in this particular hub as well, because of the innovative way we've done that. So that's one way we're doing that. Another way is we're using the intellectual property that exists in those organisations to help us reduce our back office costs in government. So we've consolidated a lot of our back office operations. That means we can invest more money in the front line. So we're actually leveraging off these great people in the private sector to help us drive down our costs and provide greater services as well. Thank you.
Any other questions from our governors? Well, ladies and gentlemen, please again join me in thanking our premiers and chief ministers for joining us today. So as we wrap up our first session today, I wanted to turn to the topic of technology innovation that is the theme of my NGA's chair initiative, Ahead of the Curve, Innovation Governors. In keeping with that theme, you'll see the topic of innovation discussed throughout our meeting. I'll offer an update on innovation in our initiatives tomorrow, and it'll feature a fireside chat with IBM CEO Ginny Rometty, and a chance to discuss in depth how we can all prepare our states for the ongoing technology transformation. But that's not all. We wanted to make sure you all had a chance to experience technology innovation firsthand. With special help from the Consumer Technology Association, the organization that brings CES to Las Vegas, Nevada every year. 160,000 people come to Las Vegas for the CES show, and hosted NGA there last month. I'm very excited to announce that we have brought a small example of CES to all of you today. In the exhibit space just outside this ballroom, NGA has created the CES Startup Alley. It features 3 innovative companies that are working to improve our lives through technology. Now, I invite all of you, please take some time to check out the exhibits, meet some of the entrepreneurs, and learn their stories. They represent companies from California, Illinois, and in keeping with our international theme, they include an Australian company with offices in California and New York. So again, please take some time to check out what they're doing over there. Thank you all again for joining us this session. The session is now closed. Thank you.